To make the Highland Cottage mug rug, we've loaded some medium weight cutaway and we're applying our batting onto this as our first step. Trim your batting back to 1 or 2 millimeters away from the stitching line, and then we're going to start laying down some fabric for our design. We've created an outline to place our fabric onto. Then we'll stitch our fabric to the batting, and then we will trim the top edge and leave the excess fabrics in the seam allowances for us to actually work with later. Now we're just going to carry on with some detailing in the embroidery until we lay down our next step, which will be some coloured detailing at one end of the skyline at step 6 and 7. So basically it's laying down pieces of fabric. Here we're doing an outline, laying down pieces of fabric, and then detailing them once we've actually got them on. So placing our fabric on, make sure it covers the seams of our placement stitching, and then we trim back. So we can see that we've left our excess fabric in our seam allowance, which is around the outside perimeter of our hoop. This design has a lot of detailed embroidery in areas to actually give silhouette and elements to our landscape. Here at step 21, we're putting on our end of our house. If you're using a loosely woven fabric like we have, then perhaps a layer of interfacing on the back of it might keep it more stable. You don't want it pulling away from your stitching. Here's our placement for our roof line with the thatching. Now we've got a layer of hessian or burlap, and we have an undercolour, so it could be calico, it could be a fabric of your choice as far as colour goes that can tint the actual roof line or of the thatching. So the choice is yours. We've put something underneath this hessian because it is see-through, but so the colour does show through and it gives you highlight. So the stitching on top of this will actually give you more detailing and will hold the edges in. Hessian or burlap does have a fray factor, and so our stitching around the outside edges of this is quite wide and it covers quite well. So it gives you a wonderful detail for this cottage. It looks very, very real. Very, very tactile and inviting to touch. Now, to create our mug rug, we're going to put a piece of lining on top of this hoop, right sides down, so it's right sides together, and we're going to stitch around the outside edge of this. Make sure there's no fullness in this lining, and we're leaving an opening on the right hand side of the hoop for us to be able to turn through. So let's remove all our pins around the edge of our hoop, and we're trimming back our seam allowances back to about 1/4 of an inch, but where the opening is, the opening will be 1/2 an inch. You'll be able to see that quite clearly once we take these pieces off. So there's our 1/2 inch seam, and just trim that little corner out. So where that extension is where we're going to be turning through. Now let's clip our corners off. Don't go too close to the stitching, but just remove a little bit of the bulk. Roll it up, give it a bit of a scrunch, because it's quite stiff, and then let's turn it through. Push the edges out. And we use the square end of the pink thing to push our corners out. It's important to do this in there so as that you get nice crisp corners, otherwise they look a bit rounded and a bit blobby. And we'll go to our iron and give this a good press. Plenty of steam. Making sure that our lining is even around the outside edge. And then we're going to turn in this edge. So press into the stitching line, and then press the lining just down a little. Then with a needle and thread, we're going to finish this, or you can use a double-sided tape, a stitching web to actually so that to get to iron that together, press it. But we generally hand sew, so a double thread knot, trim our tail. Then we just slip stitch that opening closed. Make sure it's secure. So a slip stitch for us is a stitch in the top, a stitch in the bottom, a stitch in the top, so as that it all lines up and it looks like it's nice and even. It looks like it's been machine stitched. Finishing off. Travel our thread into our work so as we can bury our tail and give that bottom edge a final press. And there we have it. We have the Highland Cottage mug rug. Thank you for joining us.